Hello everybody! So this is going to be a very practical and basic and simple movement guide. If you're looking for something like pixel walks and edge bugs, that's for someone else to teach you. But for everyone else, this is a very basic and practical guide that's going to help you squeeze out like the tiny tenths of seconds to beat your enemies to the timing. So, the very first thing that you need to learn about is the idea of air strafing, and I'm going to show you two very different jumps from this little ramp here, and I want you to pay attention to the keystrokes and look at where I land. So, here's the first one I show you. Okay, nothing to write home about, didn't really turn left. Okay, here is the second jump. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. You see how the second jump had a lot more curvature to it, like as if I had more control of my jump for whatever reason. If you were paying attention to the keystrokes, the very first jump I did not let go of W. Even after I jumped, I just held W and tried to strafe left with my camera. And for the second jump, as soon as I jumped, I let go of my W key, I held A, which is the directional key for left, along with turning my camera left. So I'm going to show it to you again, like so. So why does this matter? Well, I have a nice little diagram set up here. Imagine your camera as the steering wheel of a boat, and imagine your keys, the WASD, being the thrusters on a jet ski boat. So, why does this analogy matter? Well, let's imagine that you want to turn this boat left, right? You want to turn this boat left as much as possible. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to turn your steering wheel to the left, and you're going to activate the thruster that that gets you to the left direction, right? Because you want to have both the steering wheel and the thruster moving you in the direction you want to turn, which is left in this case. If we were to apply this analogy to what happened in Counter-Strike, the very first jump, I turned my steering wheel to the left, but I only activated the back thrusters, which ended up in a sort of kind of wobbly left turn because, well, it has more forward momentum than leftward momentum, right? Because my back thrusters are activated, aka my W key, which means I'll be going forward more than left. And as you might guess, on the second jump, I turned my steering wheel left whilst activating my right thrusters, which is the A key, which means that my turn was way more curved than the first jump. So why is the idea of air strafing very important? Well, there's two basic principles to air strafing that make it very useful. The first principle is, as already shown, it gives you a lot of control over the air, so you can do a lot of cutting through the corners like that, right? Whereas if you were to just move forward and jump, you wouldn't get anywhere as near. It gives you a lot of control through the air as soon as you get off the ground. That's what I'm trying to say. So another use case for air strafing is that actually once you're in the air, you can use air strafing constantly over and over, as in you hold A, look left, hold B, look right, over and over again. You can actually gain speed while you're in the air. So on the left side of my bar, you can see velocity 0. The number in the parentheses is going to be the max velocity I reach. So I'm going to show you a normal jump. So as you can see, a normal forward jump lands you at a velocity of about 250.01. Now let's see what the max velocity is if I were to air strafe out. Notice how it reached 273 that time. There aren't a lot of use cases for the increased amount of velocity you get from air strafing, but it's still applicable in very rare circumstances. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but there are some parkour jumps you can make, such as, the apartments to top of roof on top of Inferno mid, on lane. I'll put a video up of that jump right here, but that one is another case where you might need a strafe to make that extra little distance. So next up, we're going to be looking at the ladder. In the Source Engine, a ladder might be very complicated to understand, but I assure you, it's not that complicated. The way it works is actually very simple. If you move into the ladder, you go up. And when you move away from the ladder, you go down. What do I mean by this? Well, if I were to look towards the ladder and hold W, I would be moving towards the ladder, which means I go up. Inversely, if I were to look away from the ladder and hold W, now my direction is away from the ladder, pointing the opposite direction, which means I go down. And this can be applied with the S key as well. If I were to look away from the ladder and press S while I'm moving backwards, which is into the ladder, which means I go up. And if I were to look at the ladder and hold S, that means I'm going backwards and away from the ladder, which means I'm moving the other direction. And another thing that people really need to learn is that you can press spacebar to launch yourself off a ladder like that. Okay. So what does that have to do with ladders? I mean, you just go up to the ladder, hold W, and go up, right? It's as simple as that. Well, although you can get away with that, up in the higher ranks, you really don't want to be bricking the ladder movement like that. Ever since the Left 4 Dead days, people have discovered that if you were to stick onto a ladder, let me stick onto it normally, please. They figured out that while applying the principle of moving into the ladder, for example with the W and S key, if you were to combine it with another directional key, you would go up the ladder infinitely faster. So for example, you could just look up and a little bit to the left, like almost a 45-degree angle, right? This would be a complete 90-degree angle to the left. This would be 0 degrees forward. You want to go a little bit in between that and hold W and D. And if you might notice, while we're holding both W and D, it's going to combine the forward and left momentum to go in sort of a northeast direction, right? Kind of diagonally. That's why we're looking diagonally. So it goes straight into the ladder. So once again, from a top-down view, we're going to be holding the W and D keys together, which means that we're going to get a movement direction that looks somewhat like this. And to make sure that we don't brick the ladder, we're going to be moving towards it, right? So we have to look 45 degrees to the left to make sure that our direction, our movement direction, which is this arrow right here, goes straight with the ladder. Now, alternatively, what you can do is you can also hold the W and A key. And how this changes would mean, and how you would face the ladder now would mean you have to go 45 degrees to the right of the ladder to ensure that your momentum is straight with the ladder. So going back in game, if I were to hold the W and D key together, notice how I went up the ladder so fast that I actually got some air time as soon as I got out of the ladder. So once again, if I was to show that alternatively with the A and W key, it would look something along the lines of this. Notice how once again, I have went up the ladder so fast that I gained some air time. Once again, comparing it to my favorite term, bricking the ladder, where you just hold W, you get 0 airtime. In fact, your footsteps don't even make a noise because you're just landing on the thing normally. You're just stepping onto the platform very normally. And of course, if you would like to do it with your S key, all you have to do is just look down in a 45-degree angle. And you get a better view of exactly how we're going up the ladder. Notice once again, we're getting a lot of airtime. So a couple of you keen-eyed observers might notice that airtime is a little bit harmful to the teammates who are following you up the ladder. Even more so than if you were to go up it normally, even if you were to break the ladder, because you're practically Goomba stomping your teammates once you get out of the ladder. Well, that's when the first principle that I taught you comes in. You go up the ladder, and as soon as you get that airtime, remember when I said you gain velocity when you strafe? Well, you're going to let go of your W key, and you're going to pick your movement direction and you're going to strafe in that direction. So, putting it all together, it might look something like this. Notice how I'm completely out of the way of the ladder currently. Once again, with the keystrokes, it'll look something like this. Alright, so for the next part of this tutorial, I've come to Surf Kitsune. A lot of you might have fond memories of this map. I know for a fact that I do. So why do you need to learn surfing? Well, it completely negates fall damage. And let me show you how. When you have a slanted ramp like this, once you get onto the ramp, what you want to do is you want to hold the directional key that goes into the ramp. So for example, if I want to land on the right side of a ramp, I want to hold the A key, which goes into the ramp, right? Just like the ladder. And if I want to land on the left side of the ramp, I want to hold the D key because the D key goes into the ramp. So for example, it looks something like this, right? And you get a nice little momentum boost. That's what happens. Alternatively, if you don't hold any movement keys, what you'll do is simply fall off the ramp. And some of you guys might have guessed this right. If you were to hold the directional key away from the map, you fall even faster. Ah, very observant, some of you. Okay, so now you might be wondering, how do we apply that kind of information in a practical scenario? Well, one of the very first and most important applications of that movement tech is actually right on that yellow ramp, right over there. It just so happens that this ramp is slanted in the exact angle you need for it to cancel fall damage. So, if I were to disable draw only death notices, bring back my HUD, pay attention to what my health does when I just walk off this heaven normally. You take 22 damage. Okay. Oh. Let's also look what happens when we land on the yellow ramp. Ah. Now we have 0 fall damage, do we? You can also get real fancy with it if you really wanted to by just jumping off like this, air strafing onto the thing. Once again, with the movement I talked about, the having more control over your momentum and direction once you're in the air. You can do all sorts of stuff with it if you really wanted to. For example, this is a this is a surfable ramp. Did you guys know that? And lastly, I know I said I wouldn't be covering it, but here is the only practical edge bug that you need to know, and it's going to be the one from Silo down to Mini, and it's going to combine pretty much all of the aforementioned movement techs except for the latter one that we discussed. It's going to combine air strafing into surfing, and it's going to land in a beautiful edge bug. The way you line it up is pretty much from anywhere on the center circle of the silo. You're gonna move towards this pipe, or you want to kind of line it up with this pipe. You want to move towards the ramp, right? And as soon as you land on the ramp, you want to hold D to ascend as fast as possible, and you want to land somewhere along this yellow curve. So it'll look something along the lines of this. Very beautiful and graceful. And it's a very consistent one to land as well. So once again, you line it up with this pipe. You want to edge it, hold D as soon as you get on that ramp. And once again, no fall damage. As opposed to if you were to just run off and take a gallon of fall damage.